Hi, everybody. This is John Forsland as Chuck Caton, the Hall of Fame radio voice of the Carolina Hurricanes. And you're watching the Power Play Break, the place to talk about pucks.
Back here with Stu Grimson. Stu, now you're playing in Regina for the Pats, and 1983 draft comes along. You get drafted 186th. How did you find out, and what was your reaction when you got drafted?
I think my agent called me. I was with Don Meehan back then. I think Newport Sports called me. I had an idea that I may go in the draft, but again, we talked about it in a different segment. I didn't have a real strong first year of junior, so I was kind of on the bubble. Do I go? Do I not? I sure knew I wasn't going to go very high if I did.
Were you excited? Were you like, oh my God, I'm in the NHL. I'm here. I'm going to Detroit.
It wasn't all that, but I was excited. I certainly was excited. I had a good enough sense about the game and what it took to play at a higher level, the highest level back then, to know that you couldn't be too excited. I mean, this was the gateway. This was an opportunity. Certainly, that was the direction you were going if you did eventually end up in the NHL, but by no means did that guarantee you anything. It was still a long path from there.
So you wind up getting drafted that year. But then you wind up at the University of Manitoba. You play 3 years at junior and you wind up at the University of Manitoba. What prompted that?
Yeah, I was, I went through a stage in my development more towards my, late teens, let's say. The role, I was, always a big guy, always very physical guy, but the fighting component was hard for me. And you'll hear a lot of guys say this that have played that role. It takes you a while to get comfortable with it. It's a very demanding, not only physically, emotionally as well. It's a pretty tough role to play. And it's for that reason I walked away after junior, turned aside an opportunity to turn pro, and really I more or less quit. I just said it's not for me. Went back and played a couple of years of college hockey, and I kind of got my head turned around a little bit about.
Now, you weren't really much of a student, you said, but now all of a sudden you're in college. I mean, how did that go for you? Was that a big transition to say, now you got to really buckle down because grades are going to be important to stay on the ice?
Right. Yeah, exactly right. It's a good question. I would say even though I turned to college after leaving junior and I still was playing college hockey, the hockey part of the experience was still very much my priority. I was a lukewarm student at best. I got much better the later I got in my college career, but it took me a long time to figure out that good grades were as important as just getting grades, or more important than just getting grades.
Now, how come you didn't just decide to go to the AHL, IHL, or what was the reasoning behind that? Why did you say did the Wings come to you and say, hey, we want to sign you, bring you to camp, and want to get a look at you?
Well, actually, the way it worked, I was drafted by the Wings in '83. They've got a year to offer me a contract if they like what they see. They never offered me a contract, so I really went back into the draft. And 2 years later, it was Calgary that drafted me and offered me the opportunity. Reason back then that I didn't. With Calgary, go the AHL route. It was again largely because I wasn't comfortable with that role. I didn't see myself playing that role for all of my career.
Now you wind up going back, as you just said, into the draft in '85.
Mm-hmm.
Got a little bit more of experience now with this. Where were you this time when you get, did Don call you again and say, hey, Stu, the Flames took you this time, second time the charm? And I mean,
Right.
Did you feel more emotionally ready to do this?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly after the couple of years of college, I guess I came away with a more enlightened perspective. Had a couple of solid years playing at the University of Manitoba, and I thought, I've arrived at a place where I've got to, again, it's more like satisfy my curiosity. How far can I take this? I've had a couple of, good years of college, had a good junior experience. All the elements are there for me to turn pro. Let's see how far I can take it.
What was your first camp like with them?
With Calgary, it was challenging. It was tough. It was eye-opening. It was interesting. You're playing with guys my size, and they're stronger. They seem to be faster. They seem to be far more intense. So, you really began to get a sense of, hey, this is being done. This game is being played at a higher level in a lot of different ways. So it was very much an eye-opening experience for me.
So you're there, now you wind up in Salt Lake. You know, how was that being told, okay, look, you're good to be here, but we got to send you down? I mean, did that kind of demoralize you? Were you like, okay, you know what, I'm going to go work hard and come back up?
It really didn't. I didn't expect to be taken. I didn't expect to make the big team right out of training camp. I did not. I knew that the path for me, again, a bigger guy, a guy that was taking longer to develop, it was no surprise to me that I was being asked to go to the IHL and play in Salt Lake. And I did so knowing that there were some elements of my game that were going to have to step up in order for me to get back to the NHL, just based on what I had seen at training camp and based on what I had seen in the exhibition season. So, no, I went down with you know, a pretty good attitude, a pretty good mindset. I've got some things to work on if I'm going to get a crack at this.
Any guys there, like I think Lanny McDonald was probably there at that time, right, with Calgary.
Yeah.
Any guys kind of like give you good advice when you were there, or kind of talk to you about like, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that? I mean, were the veterans looking out for you at that point?
You know, it's a good question, and there were a lot of really solid veteran guys in the Calgary organization around that time, guys that made a difference in my development. Guys like Colin Patterson was there. He was a roommate during training camp one year and part of the exhibition season. Joel Otto. Jim Poplinski was a guy that had a real impact on me. But, you know, they're able to kind of speak to you, speak from their own personal experience. Hey, playing in the minors is part of it. Go down, do what you need to do, and there's an opportunity for you if you're able to kind of accomplish what you need to.
Now you're playing, excuse me, in Salt Lake, and you do get a call to come up. You know, what was that like for you? Where were you? We always ask that question to guys. What was it like your first NHL game? You know, where were you when you got the call? You're going. And what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, we were on the road. I can't recall where with Salt Lake, and then I joined. And so to answer your question, I was nervous. Instantly, I was nervous. Didn't see it coming. Things were going pretty well in Salt Lake, but did not see this coming. And the big team, the Flames, were just starting on a road trip. They were doing actually a swing through the Northeast. Their first game was in Buffalo, and then they were bouncing around, I think, Philly, Long Island, a bunch of different places. So I got to play in Buffalo, played on a line with Tim Hunter and Joel Otto. Looked more like an offensive line than it did a hockey line. But, you know, had a pretty good start, got into a scrap with Kevin McGuire, and it went pretty well. And, you know, the problem was, if you recall, back then, I mean, Calgary was just a couple of years away from winning it all. They had strong teams. They had big guys. They were really well-stocked in guys that played my kind of game. It was a tough lineup to crack. I remember playing the first game of that road trip. There were 5 other games on that road trip that I watched. I never dressed for. And I think the team allowed 6 goals against or 8 goals against in about a 5-game stretch. Things were just going so well. I mean, I think they ran the table most of the rest of that trip, and I went down shortly after. But a great experience in the meantime.
Now you're there, and things are going well, and you're coming up and down, and you get traded to Chicago.
Yeah.
How did that feel? I mean, I've talked to guys, you know, some guys said it's been disruptive, you know, it was a shock, you know. How was it for you to all of a sudden say, well, look, you're going to be traded away? I mean, were you upset? Were you kind of like, well, I'm going to a new city, or was it?
Well, again, Chicago was a great opportunity for me. Chicago, and I didn't know this at the time, but it became the moment at which I established myself as an everyday NHLer. Chicago was the turning point for me. But even then, before I got a chance to integrate into their lineup, I knew, based on my Calgary experience, this is an organization that's very deep in a Stu Grimson type player. If I'm going to get a crack at the NHL, it's probably going to come somewhere else. And I was thrilled that it happened to be Chicago. Great teams, solid teams back then. They played in that old building, which was custom fit.
Stadium was great.
Oh, it was unbelievable. It's electric.
Small rink.
There'll never be another environment like that, not in professional hockey for sure. So for me, and I always remember the cab ride into Chicago after I got picked up by the Blackhawks, and I'm going, a city this size wants me to be on their hockey team. I was blown away. And I mean, I felt like I was sipping through a fire hose for the first 4 months that I was there, but it was a great experience.
Who was on that team with you at that point that really stuck out to you as a player?
Good organization, really solid program. Eddie Belfour was there, Doug Wilson was there, Jeremy Roenick was there, Dave Manson was there. We had Dirk Graham as a captain. Keith Brown was a huge influence on me. A lot of guys.
Was Keenan there at that point, or no?
Mike Keenan was there. He was our head coach at that point. Daryl Sutter was his assistant, soon to be associate coach. So grew up under some really good hockey guys.
What was Keenan like for you guys? I mean, I heard he's really tough, really demanding. Doesn't take anything from anybody.
Yeah, volatile at times. A smart guy, a good hockey guy, and one that got results back then. Back then, he was coaching in an era where you could be very, very divisive and you could get away with it. I don't know that style of coaching would really be effective today, but it was effective for us. He had big, tough teams, and we surprised a lot of folks and played pretty well. Always regret that we never won the big one. Went to the finals in '92 against Pittsburgh, and they ran the table on us. But we had some teams that were capable of making some noise and even doing a lot better than we did.
Now you're there. Who was your biggest rival at that point? Was it the Wings?
Boy.
Or was it just the team? What team really just...
Pick any team in the old Chuck Norris division.
Well, Mike Keenan, Mike Peluso was probably there at that same time, right?
Yeah, he and I were teammates. Yeah,
And then
Peluso and I were
I was just
teammates.
thinking too, Bob McGill was part of that crew. I remember Bob McGill saying it was a rough group. He goes, a rough group, he said.
We were a tough crew, no question. And Dave Manson on the back end could handle himself. Steve Thomas was there at the same time, and
Stumpy?
I'll tell you what, Stumpy was sneaky tough. This was a guy, he wasn't very big, but when he dropped his gloves with guys his size, other middleweights, he'd surprise a lot of people. Absolutely surprise a lot of people. Yeah, we had good guys then.
We'll have more with Stu right after this.